Jake Ciely is a senior fantasy writer at The Athletic and host of the All In Speed Run podcast. Many may know him as the All In Kid. He'll rank just about anything, he loves DuckTales, he once owned a deli, and you're better off not asking him to join a league with kickers. These are his late round perspectives. I've teamed up with DraftKings to kick off Week 1. Head over to DraftKings, deposit $5, and get rewarded with one DFS ticket for Week 1. And play free for your shot at a share of millions. The ticket reward amount varies and is based on deposit, but make sure you sign up with promo code LATEROUND today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369 in New York. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. One per customer. Minimum $5 deposit required. Ticket rewards or site credits only valid for use on eligible DFS contests. Ticket rewards are single use and expire 9/8/25 at 8:20 p.m. Eastern. See terms at DraftKings.com/promotions. Sponsored by DraftKings. Now back to the show. Do you listen to a lot of like fantasy podcasts and stuff, or are you more so just like I just stay in, I just do my thing, and then I just kind of consume other media outside the space?
So it's going to sound so mean being in the industry, but 90% no. I try to dip in a little bit. Like I obviously have listened to you. I listened to Chris Harris, Alfredo with the series, which you're about to talk about.
Yes.
But the biggest reason, and I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like you do the same thing, is like, I don't want to cloud my opinion too much. Like I want to have mine in place, and then I just go and like, hey, I'll check this one out this week, and maybe I missed something. Yeah,
right, exactly. It's more so for me, like, of course you want to support, friends and stuff in the space and whatnot, but I also just, not only that, but I kind of want to break from, all this stuff that we're doing 24/7. Like, I just want to kind of veg out and just think about something else. But I was listening to anyone who hasn't done so. Alfredo Brown, friend of the show, he started doing the Pretend GM podcast again, and he is bringing on different analysts. I was on, you were on, and he talks more about like process and life and not just fantasy football stuff. So to me, I'm like, oh, I have friends that are being interviewed. I want to hear the kind of crazy things that they're going to say on this show. Right. And I listened to parts of your episode, and you know what? I completely forgot that you owned a deli. I completely forgot that was because when we first, we've known each other for like over a decade basically now.
Yeah. And
when I first met you, I feel like it was around the time that you would have owned the deli, right?
It was right around that time, actually. I think it was close to closing. It's funny, you bring in deli, like that's the reason you say I want to digest other things. It's like I can always compare it to if you're a butcher and then you have to come home and eat steak for dinner every night. It's like, it's not the last thing I want to do is just do more of this, right? But you kind of need that break. But yeah, it was the deli. It was also the ill-fated wonderfulfootball.com. Do you remember that from back in the day? That's actually one of our first overlaps.
I forgot about football.com. That completely, like it was just out of my memory. Wait, didn't I do stuff on football.com also?
Yes. Yes. It was you, me, and Denny for a little while.
I completely forgot. How pathetic is it that I did work for a website and I don't even remember doing it?
Somebody had to remind me about it last year. It's like, oh yeah, the biggest waste of a URL in the history of everything.
Oh my gosh, this is like mind blowing to me that this is like this was not even like I have a decent memory for stuff like that.
Right?
None, zero, no memory of football.com. I'm assuming it's not even close to a thing anymore. Yeah, like as in
it's not really, and it's all soccer.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that would make sense.
The actual football. Meh.
Yeah, they had this great URL, and then nothing happened with it. Man, was it just who else was it? Just us three? You said me, you, and Denny?
There was one or two other people. I don't even remember now. And
yeah, I don't either.
The guy, I'm spacing on the guy who brought me over with you guys. Cause it was like us three trying to do the majority of it. And I remember like both you and Derek are like, man, this is ridiculous. They're just throwing so much at our plate just for nothing. And like, not, you want to get your foot in the door, but it was, that was Yeah, if you want to see how to poorly run a website, they go back and somehow resurrect that.
Oh my gosh. After this, I'm going to have to Twitter search like my handle with football.com and see if there's anything out there to see like what I was saying and stuff. And then the other thing I need to talk about is your gaming background and the 16-bit stuff. Like where did that like, is this just a nostalgia thing for you? Or is it like, are you 100%. Crushing like 16-bit games on the regular?
Not on the regular as much anymore. You know, finally getting a wife after 20 years it kind of curbed that a little bit. You were actually also a part of that wonderful, 16-bit and under video game draft that we did back in the day.
Oh, I do. Okay. I do remember that.
You remember that one? You had a pretty strong team. Yeah. So this is my personality. That's why I did it. So it originally started off with when back in the day of football.com and the deli worlds as, doing video and be like, hey, maybe I shouldn't just have this blank white wall behind me.
Yeah.
And it was like, I got a few Funkos. I got like a Giants helmet back when I used to care about the Giants. And then it snowballed. It turned into this. It kept adding to it. I love it. And like, look, and that's the thing is like, I've seen the comments. I've seen people who are like, I'm not listening to some guy that looks like he lives in his, mom's basement or, he's still a 12-year-old. And I'm like, well, if you don't, but that's me. That's legitimately me. So I'm just embracing it.
No, I love that. What's your, if you were to just rank top 1 to 3, like 16-bit type, most likely side-scrolling type games, what would you go with?
Side-scrolling, so you mixed it up with the side-scrolling. Okay,
you don't have to say, it doesn't have to be side-scrolling. I just assumed that was the direction you might go in. But just any.
Oh, no.
Top 3.
Well, because Legend of Zelda Link to the Past is still
that's
always top. And then Mario Brothers 3. And then, I don't know, what's a good third?
To me, Super Mario Brothers 3 is my go-to. Like it's so timeless. So nice, so easy to play.
Would be my Mega Man 2. I'm always a Mega Man.
Okay. Were you SNES over Sega back in the day?
I was, but I had everything. Yeah. I actually have a jailbroken, one of those mini SNES ones, but one of the ones I got them off eBay. So it has all Nintendo, all Super Nintendo, all Genesis, all Atari. Awesome. Oh, so it's got everything you could possibly want on it, including that wonderful Turtles game, which gave us anxiety trying to get through that swim level with the,
oh my gosh,
sped up, right?
Impossible.
No, the only way I got through it was with the Game Genie.
It's that level. And you know what the other impossible level was the magic carpet ride in Aladdin.
Why was that so hard?
It shouldn't have been hard. And then, another hard game. And I actually heard, I know that we're getting way off track here, but I heard a story about this. This might be, someone can fact check me, but did you ever play the Lion King game that came out like around the time the movie came out? And
I did, but I never played all the way through it.
Right. So evidently they made it really, really hard on purpose because they wanted people to rent it and not be able to beat it and then go buy it.
Oh,
yeah.
I thought you were going to say additional rentals. Wow. But either way.
And apparently it worked from a business model standpoint. Like people actually did get really frustrated.
Really?
And there was some really insane things that you had to do in that game it was like, it's just so bizarre though. You get these children movies and these kids movies in Aladdin and Lion King, and then they make the games freaking impossible.
I will say the only satisfying one was Battletoads finally getting through the speeder bike level.
Isn't that notoriously like one of the hardest games like ever?
It is, but you eventually memorize it after doing it 750 times before you finally get through.
Yeah, exactly. All right. I want to shift to our focus a little bit to football here. My first question to you, I like to ask this when people first hop on Perspectives, but how would you sort of describe yourself as an analyst, anyone who hasn't listened to you and read your work? Would you say you're more numbers driven? You're more film driven? Like what's your process like? We're about to start the season. I mean, for the record, we're recording this before the Thursday night game. So this will be out on Friday. Hopefully we won't talk too much about, those teams tonight, but even if we do, you guys now know, but are you analyzing this stuff in spreadsheets more or, by watching or a mix of the both?
It's actually almost 50-50. I hate to make that the answer, but for everybody, the explanations behind it is I watch, I believe what I see, I believe what I know. I don't think I'm the best watcher in the business. Like I actually give that to Emery Hunt. I think he's the best scout in the business, but I recognize there's a ton of people out there who watch and know football even better than I do. But I've watched enough that I know things, and then I use the numbers to go back and kind of fact check myself. Like, I go through and like find the metrics throughout the week, and I go independently. I watch everything. I make notes on Sunday, Monday, the other days and stuff like that. But then once like we have access to True Media, there's a million sites out there we can go through.
Yeah.
But then I go through and like look for outliers, and then I go through and look for things that maybe were important to me. Like, oh, I didn't expect blank to do this week. Let me go see if the numbers are matching up with either. And then I'll go back and readjust. So, my like custom projection spreadsheet in the preseason, it's like for people that don't believe me. I'm like, hey, I don't believe your target share. I want to change it. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of why I created it, is because I don't think any of us are 100%. Right. We know none of us are 100% right, but I like to go back and forth. So to say my ranking, so to speak, would be like, this is what I feel, go through my projections and the metrics and all that type of stuff, come back to my rankings, run it through one more time, and then that's where I get my final result. It's kind of like going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
I always hesitate asking that question because I think most people will have they should have some mix, right? I mean, it might be more like 80-20 or something like that, but like Chris Harris is going to be more, you mentioned him at the top of the show. He'll be more film. I'll be more data, but it's not like, like, people are like shocked when they learn that I literally throughout the week then watch every game from the previous week. It's like, right. Yeah, I mean, it's my job. I don't want to sound like a moron when I'm on these podcasts and stuff, So, I just like to sort of, establish, where you're coming from with some of these takes before we really dig in. But now that drafts are finished, I'm assuming that, are you done drafting, officially done drafting, or do you have any more?
No, I always try to make sure I don't have anything come Labor Day, just because I want to hone in on week one. By the way, real quick, credit to you. JJ sent me the guide, and I actually read through, and even that, because I know you lean more towards metrics, and I fact checked myself on some of the rookies just to give you an example. So I even look to other people as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. But now that drafts are over, what's one strategy that you saw a lot of other teams use this year? It could be something that you feel really confident in, or maybe even not, because I think that there's a lot of directions you can go here. But what's one strategy that other teams used that you think was just not right, that you just really couldn't understand why people were approaching their drafts in that manner?
I can never get on board with this. I have come around to saying, you know what, if you want to go elite quarterback in round 4, maybe round 3, depending on your setup. If you want to go elite tight end, I always reference the Travis Kelce years of like, you need to be a top 10 wide receiver to make that first round, let alone second round, or I should say second, let alone first round value warranted. And I don't have a problem going either direction. If you want to do one, like I said, late third, early fourth, and of course I'm coming for your Twitter handle with that. I know you've changed throughout the years and flexible.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's when they double tap it. Like, I even tried it once just to see, like, hey, maybe I can get into this and see if there's some type of way where, like, you have that leg up at both and your team can come out in a good shape. And I just don't see it being in a good shape because you've sacrificed what we know when you go early quarterback or early tight end. You're sacrificing running back, wide receiver. You're playing catch up. You offset it by having that quote unquote advantage. But it's just the fact that that advantage has to be so stark for it to pay off. And when you double tap it, now you're basically buying in saying, I'm going to have a quarterback that scores 3 to 4 more points than most everybody else except 2 teams. Same thing at tight end. And if it just doesn't hit, you're looking at your team. And I got to the 8th round and I'm like, man, I'm still trying to play catch up with my running backs and wide receivers. And I cannot buy into it.
Yeah. I feel like the only time I had a discussion with Sean Ciely about this on a Perspectives episode, because this year felt like there was that like dead spot in like round 3-ish, like middle of round 3 and into like round 4. And that's where I was like, okay, I can get that's around the time where I can get behind like quarterback and whatnot if you want to go that direction. But, it's very, very difficult to take on that opportunity cost when it's multiple onesie positions like that. It's just, you feel so far behind, and you not only need the quarterback and tight end to hit, but now because you're behind at wide receiver and running back, you need those positions to hit too, right? Like, because realistically you're now, 2 rounds behind with some of these wideouts or running backs. And so the guys that you did get early, you need them to hit, or else then you're really falling back and you don't have the depth to be able to make up for it. So yeah, I mean, you see it every year. You see it a lot in home leagues and stuff like that. And you probably can get away with it more in some home league environments, 10-team leagues and stuff, just because they're shallower. But yeah, I think that's a good call out that, it's just really, really tough to come back from. Is there a player in your drafts that you seem to walk away with seemingly in like every draft?
So there was a couple, like Travion Henderson until everybody started doing it. A lot of Matthew Golden and Cedric Tillman, just because of last year. But the one that is the most, and as I say this, he's in my 30s for wide receivers because he has a terrible week 1 matchup. And I even said, be patient. If you don't draft him, maybe go throw out a low ball offer after week 1 because Calvin Ridley faces the Broncos.
I was gonna say it's gotta be Ridley, right?
You were going to guess 100%. And like, the fact is, it's not just Surtain. Like, we can look at wide receivers and understand teams will move them around. You can avoid corners to a certain degree. Volume can offset it. But it's also when you have that team around a corner like Surtain that you're going to be like, okay, maybe we'll walk into a 2 for 40 for 1 week. But the schedule overall is good. And the continued thing that I kept saying is like, we were so excited. Terry McLaurin with Jaden McDaniels last year and Bo Nix and what he did for Cortland Sutton. And it's like, I know not a lot of people are like super high on Cam Ward, but if you look at his profile and the way that he's throwing the deep ball, already doing it in the preseason and practices, and the fact that last year Calvin Ridley was a wide receiver 3 on 120 targets with only 4 red zone and 1 end zone target the entire year.
Crazy.
And the schedule is just there for him after this week where it's not many more threats throughout the season. A lot of games that we're projecting, I put that in quotes, projecting to be potential shootouts. And it's Cam Ward. He's going to be aggressive with a nice deep ball. And I think Calvin Ridley, here's the shocking stat. Calvin Ridley's never had a 1,000-yard season. I was shocked to see that. I was like, yeah, see?
Yeah,
like, I would have bet money at least 1.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
So I have a ton of Calvin Ridley, mostly because you were getting a wide receiver 3 or 4 cost.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is somebody who could be a wide receiver 2.
Yeah, something's really, because like I've done shows and talked about how, obviously rookie quarterbacks, they impact their pass catchers in a negative way versus a regular veteran quarterback just because they don't throw the ball as much on those teams and they're not going to be as efficient. So they're not going to score as many touchdowns. However, because I have Ridley as a player to target in the draft guide this year. If you look at the wideouts who have emerged and become like top 24, top 12 wide receivers with rookie quarterbacks since like 2011 or so, the average target share of the top 24 guys, there's like 14 of them or something like that. But the average target share among those guys is 26%. So essentially like if a wide receiver ends up emerging and being fine with a rookie quarterback, it's because there's a lack of competition / he's just getting peppered with targets on his team, right? Like a Keenan Allen or like a Reggie Wayne or whoever. And they're just getting peppered with targets. And you look at Tennessee, and this is a situation, seems like a situation where that would be the case. Like, I think that Calvin Ridley could inch towards like a 30% target share this year. Like realistically, I like Alec Iamaner, but like we can't just like assume that he's going to take on a massive target share. I love Chigakonkwo, but we don't, we can't make these assumptions with guys who are not locked in. We can say we'll draft them versus cost, but I wouldn't be shocked if we like he could easily be top 5 in the league in target share. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And real quick to backtrack, as people are probably screaming right now at your podcast, I tripped myself. 100 receptions, not 1,000 yards. I was thinking so that sounds a little bit more reasonable, but yeah, never 100 receptions. His high was 90 and it was that year that he like blew up for the Falcons, obviously, but 100 receptions, everybody, not yards. But yes, and that's the biggest thing. And my mind was jumping ahead is that target share there. I'm with you. I was a fan of Iamaner. I did a Free Guys article. I do it every year over at The Athletic where it's like the guys in the 14th, 15th, even undrafted rounds. And Iamaner was there. And I was like, hey, all he needs to do is get past Tyler Lockett, who looked pretty washed last year, and Van Jefferson, who has 2 games a year. Well, here's the good news. He's already passed Van Jefferson. But your point being is Iamaner's not a first round talent. And we can be excited about that. Okonkwo, we kind of wanted that to happen after his rookie season because of the efficiency, but he's kind of still Okonkwo. Like you look up and down this depth chart, and for all the arguments people are making to be on McMillan and his target share volume with the Panthers, why aren't we doing the exact same thing for Ridley? So I'm with you on that. Yeah, 100%. Is there a player that you wish you drafted more, but you just seem to not be able to pull the trigger? Maybe because there's other players around him, that you liked a little bit more. So I just said McMillan. Tedero McMillan was actually one of them, mostly because, of course, 3-4 weeks ago, there was a lot more competition for him there. And I was like, well, maybe he doesn't get to 140 targets. Maybe this isn't Malik Neighbors. And also, Bryce Young being part of it is like, I'm I'm an apologist for Bryce Young, but at the same time, I'll acknowledge so far throughout his career, he's been much better in the intermediate game. So I was worried about ADOT. I was worried about how many are catchable. I could have seen a Calvin Ridley-like season for him, which is still good. Yeah. It's just people wanted to take him inside the top 20. But the biggest one, and this has to do with the quarterback situation. And look, I was just not drafting Tyler Warren. I actually did a show a month ago, and it was like takes on the season. And then I was like, one of them is we won't have a single rookie tight end one this year. We've been way too spoiled the last 2 seasons. Well, that was before Daniel Jones in his intermediate game took over at quarterback, and that he's just going to pepper the heck out of Tyler Warren. So for differing reasons, I just did, and Tyler Warren being in, especially in that 7th, 8th round is like, that's usually where I'm loading back up on wide receivers or running back that fell. So to your point, it was more about the names that were there that I didn't want to invest, and they never made it to me. But now I'm definitely like, well, I wish I would have had a few more. I have like 1 share of McMillan and 1 share of Warren, and I'm like, I wish I had more now. Yeah, no, look, the Tyler Warren thing is really interesting to me because I was drafting it because I did tons of best ball drafts and stuff, and I was drafting him when he was like a 10th round pick, and it was easy. But he got on DraftKings, like he got like late 6th ADP, like towards the end of the off season, and I couldn't get there. And I'm on Twitter and stuff, and I see really respected analysts who I adore, like saying like really, really great things about Tyler Warren. And look, I liked him as a prospect. I like Colson Loveland as a prospect, and if they tested, I would have probably liked them even more. We're able to show off their athleticism a little bit. But I also look at Indianapolis and I say to myself, okay, if you're going to be in on Tyler Warren, like I get the upside case because he's good. But at the same time, Michael Pittman's been a target machine since he's been there, right? 25% target share is basically like yearly for him. And then Josh Downs last year, only Puka Nacua and Malik Neighbors were better in targets per route run than Josh Downs. I mean, like, you have 2 really, really solid target getters. And historically, we've seen tight ends break out when they are a top 2 option, within their offense. And then, we're also talking Daniel. Like, I agree that Daniel Jones is definitely the better fit for Tyler Warren. I wish I had more season-long Tyler Warren, but it just got to the point towards the end of the draft season where like it was just hard for me to pull the trigger based on where he was going. But I'm not like, I didn't fade, but like you, it just got to a point, it seemed like where it seemed like the hype was just getting a little bit out of control. And we could easily, because it is a talented rookie tight end, we could easily look back on this podcast and be like, man, these guys are idiots, right? Because he's a player. But situationally, it just doesn't seem like it's there that much, right? Like it just like, are you like, even now knowing Danny Dimes is starting for them, like, do you think that he's a locked in top 6 tight end in ADP by, in ranks, or top 7? Like, are you taking him over like TJ Hawkinson right now? No. And I mean, part of that's because Jordan Aston's suspended, but Hawkinson's a great one. You bring that up. Hawkinson's season when he was a rookie was basically kind of last man standing. Go back to Evan Ingram years and years ago with the Giants, last man standing. Sam Laporta, almost everybody else got hurt. And like, that's your point, is that you have to be a top 2 option to really click. And it's not even that Daniel Jones. I do think they're going back to Anthony Richardson at some point, which means stock up for Alec Pierce, but stock down for pretty much anybody else. I think Downs can play with either of them. This is why I took a lot of flyers on Josh Downs late, and especially in best ball. But I think that he hurts Pittman a little bit, less so Downs, but the big winner is Pierce. But the big downturn would be for Warren and in the underneath game. So that was part of the reason too. It's just the cost was always so prohibitive. And it's like not like a t-shirt or anything like that, but I always say don't buy all the risk. I feel like Warren, as you said, in the 6th round, you're buying everything risk-wise, and there's almost 0 upside left. Yeah, especially because that range still has really good wide receivers. Like that was the hardest part for me, is that I'm sitting there looking at like, these like Rome Odunze and stuff, and I'm like, I can't take Tyler Warren over Rome Odunze. I just can't do it, So it's been a really weird journey for me with Warren. I have enough where like if he does have a good season in best ball, I'm not totally toast, but I do think that some people, it got a little out of hand. Like I couldn't call him like my league winning tight end just based on the cost and based on how things were changing. If you were to give, since you are the all in kid, I'm gonna ask you to give a gray area answer and not an all in answer.
what kind of odds, just a percent chance, okay, 0 to 100, that Daniel Jones, here, I'll set an over under. Daniel Jones games played, okay? Okay. And then I'll move it based on how quickly you answer this. Okay. We'll start at 8.5 games.
Under.
Oh, you go under? Okay. That's where, okay. Yeah. Do you think that there's I could really see a scenario where the Colts, now the one thing that's making me not feel as strong is that I think the division is just up for grabs in general. So like they might be more competitive than we think, but I think there's a chance that like Steichen and Jones are both gone at the same time, basically, right? Where they fire him and then then the new coach steps up and then Anthony Richardson's just the starter and they see what they have in him. And then that's how the season kind of goes, but I'm with you. I'm hesitant to say that, Dimes is going to be their like 17 game answer. It's similar to, I think like Flacco, like who do you think plays more games this year? Joe Flacco or Daniel Jones?
If health's not involved, Flacco. Okay. So I'm a conspiracy theorist on this one, and I'm not usually down this road, but here's why. So I think Flacco is basically the quarterback until week 14 when they decide whether it's Sanders or Gabriel. Like one of those, like we're going to make it through. Maybe if they're 1-11, maybe it happens a little bit before that. Like, I just don't think until, things are toast. The thing with Daniel Jones is, this is where I went with it. It's like, all right, so if you're Steichen, you start Anthony Richardson, he has a bad game. What happens immediately after the game? Are you going to turn to Daniel Jones? Next week, turn to Daniel Jones, turn to Daniel Jones, turn to Daniel Jones. With Daniel Jones, we know who he is. I mean, we saw this in preseason when the beat reporters, the very first 7-on-7, I'm sure you remember this, the first day, they're like, Daniel Jones overthrew a wide open Alec Pierce. He's the Daniel Jones we've always known. Yeah. So I was saying, like, wait for him to have a bad game or two. Then you turn to Anthony Richardson. He has a bad game or two. It's like, well, we can't go back to Daniel Jones. Right. We know what he is. So there's my conspiracy theorist of it, is that you're just waiting for 2 bad games for Daniel Jones. You go back to Anthony Richardson, hopefully that you save his career. And if not, you move on and you have a top 3 pick.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like when you're a coach on the hot seat, because I feel the same way with like Brian Dable, right? In New York. You're a Giants fan, aren't you? Right?
No, I gave them So speaking of Daniel Jones, as soon as they drafted, I'm like, I'm done with the Giants. I'll give them 1 year to prove me wrong. That's right. They didn't prove me wrong. I'm like, I'm out. I'm done. And then you've watched this organization for the last 6 years. They do everything possible to make the wrong decision. I will give credit. The last 2 years, they're kind of coming around a little bit, but I can't play this game anymore. Plus we're fantasy guys. It's hard to root for a team. No,
I totally get it. But like with the Giants, like Brian Dable, to me, like he's on the hot seat. Like if things don't, like if they don't show some promise this year, then he could easily be gone next year. And so from that perspective, like I think that they're going to have to be more aggressive with a quarterback change, because if Jackson Dart comes in and he shows that he's really good, then Dable can go to the front office and be like, see, told you he's good. Let me develop him and we could turn this into something. And I feel similarly to like a guy like Steichen, where it, like you're saying, if you start with Anthony Richardson and you need to bench Anthony, you can't go back. Right? Like it's very rare that we see like even like a Bryce Young situation kind of go down where, you sit him for a little bit and, he gets benched, and then I know injury kind of played a role in him coming back and stuff, but like, that you rarely see that rebound favorably, and you'd rather, as a coach want to end the season, with at least some hope, and you wouldn't be able to really do that with Daniel Jones. So I think that's going to be a very, very interesting situation to watch, especially with Tyler Warren. Are you in or out generally this year with the rookie hype? Now, I did an episode in July about how ADP is rising with rookies. Like we've seen, higher ADPs with running backs and wide receivers. But do you think it's now officially like gotten out of hand, or are you still drafting these guys?
I'd say mostly out of hand, just because it's spilling into questionable situations and people that are buried. That's the issue, is that, as you said, 2 months ago, like I was loving Travion Henderson in the 5th and 6th round. And then he's all the way up into the 3rd, which, hey, it might work out, but now the opportunity cost again. Others, RJ Harvey was actually, they were flipped. RJ Harvey was more in the 4th round immediately after the draft, because it was like, oh, new Alvin Kamara. But it's not just the fact of how deep this running back class is, as you know, but they're all falling, like most of them are falling into split backfields where we're kind of hoping we can project, and we're hoping that the younger talent takes over. But as I said, it's like spilling into the wide receivers as well, even though I'm teasing it, but I do have a hot take that involves a rookie. But anyway, like the IU Manor, which you brought up, I did a show 2 weeks ago and I was talking about Kyle Williams, and I'm not a huge Kyle Williams fan. I was like, but he could develop. And they're like, oh, Kyle Williams tested this and everything like that. I'm like, the dude's like 6th on the depth chart. Like, he can't even get past Keishon Booty. Like, let's relax a little bit. So I think that's where it falls down to. And like the Colston Loveland one, he's not as high as Tyler Warren, but people are wanting to draft Colston Loveland as a top 10 tight end. I'm like, even if he is, which we assume he's past Kmet, like they have 3 wide receivers, and actually their other rookie is now buried behind Zacchaeus. Like, you just have to understand the situation. So I say yes, just because I'm okay with the Hendersons, I'm okay with Hampton and all the rest like that. But it's when you start to trickle down to that second level, which most of them are going to need at least half or a full year before we really see fantasy value.
Yeah, I also think that this could be where Best Ball Brain because I get a lot of feedback from people being like, do you think, or questions and stuff like, do you think that Best Ball is going to change the way that people draft in season long and stuff like that? And in Best Ball, rookies, people are going to attack rookies because obviously in Best Ball, playoff weeks are so important, and you don't have the luxury of just like being like, you know what, I'll let Torrey Horton, just sit on the waiver wire and I'll just pounce on him earlier than the rest of my league mates. You got to draft the dude, right? And so in Best Ball, you're drafting these guys and you're elevating them because you know that rookies will, come together and be able to give some more production and better performances down the stretch, second half of the year, in the fantasy playoffs and stuff. Just historically, that's what we've seen. But in a managed season long league, it is a little bit different. Like I've kind of tinkered with the idea, and I'll ask you how you kind of handle this. Like Torrey Horton's probably a good example because I like Horton, but I also recognize that the chance that he like comes out, on fire or is pretty slim. Like it's probably not going to happen. I hope it does, but more than likely not going to happen. And so in those situations, are you like, let's say that you love Horton or you love Alec Iamaner, right? And now obviously he's starting, so maybe he's not even that great of an example, but regardless, like, are you drafting these guys and holding them, or are you saying to yourself, okay, day 3 rookies, I know who they are, I've done my research, I feel good about like their place on this team, I'm just going to be a week ahead of my league mates, hopefully, in adding them off the wire, as opposed to, holding on to this roster spot that I'll probably end up dropping some of these guys, and then you're going to regret that towards the end of the year whenever someone else picks them up.
Yeah, I think that really comes down to like, what is your bench? And, I did another article, not to like, oh, look at all my articles, but I did an article that one of the biggest mistakes people make is mismanaging their benches. And it's usually coming out of the draft with a bunch of replaceable options that you can find on waivers every single week. But the other part of it is these handcuff running backs or these upside wide receivers that people draft and then they drop 2 weeks in. Like, what was the point of drafting? Like, you draft Trey Benson, James Conner's healthy for the 2 weeks, and you drop him. Why did you draft Trey Benson? Exactly. You should have never drafted him in the first place. Right. So I think that's the question people have to ask themselves, because I don't want to give a carte blanche answer, because it's like, hey, I have a 7-man bench in my home league. I can hold on to IU Manor for half the season and then finally be like, all right, it's not happening. You have a 4 or 5-man bench, it might be a little bit different, but I think you have to kind of, create a narrative for yourself, so to speak, or like the narrative of how does it happen. So Torrey Horton, I think that's a really good one, because Cooper Kupp looks toast. Cooper Kupp gets hurt again. All of a sudden, Torrey Horton matters. But that's not going to happen without that. So if 4 weeks into the season, Kupp looks like Kupp from even 90% of Kupp from 2 or 3 years ago. And then you're like, well, then I could just drop Horton, because it's just not going to happen unless he gets hurt. And then, like you said, a week ahead. So it really comes down to, I try to wait as long as possible, basically until the buys. And like, I need to, and that's just my worst player. But if I'm drafting for upside like that, and like the Trey Bensons, especially handcuffs, but even higher wide receivers, then it's going to take a lot for me to let go, because those guys can be top 30 wide receivers if everything hits. I go pick up Demario Douglas. He's going to be wide receiver 40. Like, cool. Like, I'll pass on Demario Douglas to hold on to one if I can. Put it that way. Yeah, it makes sense. We see breakout offenses every year. Are there any offenses that you think are going to surprise people? Because obviously, if the offense goes off, more than likely, multiple players in that offense are going to be values from an ADP perspective. Yeah. So I don't know if you've heard the Bears are supposed to be good with this Ben Johnson guy. I'm definitely not coming with the Bears. I think the Jaguars would be like a very popular one, because we want Trevor Lawrence to be that generational talent that we always thought he was going to be. They have Travis Hunter, Liam Cohen, and all the rest. I that offensive line, like I'm not an offensive line like evaluator. I trust everything, but when you see multiple sites being like one of the worst, this is going to be bad. Like it makes me hesitant a little bit on how much they're going to break out. And again, it's kind of like you said, I lean into more like didn't see coming, like you asked versus oh, we know the Jaguars, we know the Bears. So there was two that I thought of. I almost said the Panthers, but what's after McMillan? Like, I hope Leggett kind of, I would say bounces back, but just better than he was as a rookie. But even after that, it's kind of like, yeah, Jatavian Sanders is interesting in a deep league. Leggett, deep league. Like, where's that really going to go? So call me crazy. I'm going to go back to, we've already mentioned the quarterback, the Browns. Like, they were going from like one of the worst, but here's where I looked at it is like, can I get multiple pieces of fantasy value? So we already know Jerry Jeudy. We know Njoku stays healthy. Joe Flacco, by the way, over 4,400 yards in his last 17 starts. Ian Hardis keeps bringing up the fact that he pushed it all the way up to 4,700 if you include playoff starts. It's an insane number. Yeah. So Cedric Tillman involved. And then right out of the gate, this is a rookie that I do like, is like, I just think Dylan Sampson needs more attention. Like, I think he can be their Austin Eckler. And the consistent option where Jerome Ford is Jerome Ford, but in a split backfield, I want the pass catcher. Joe Flacco's going to keep throwing. We've got two wide receivers, a tight end, a running back, and then if Judkins ever shows up, like Ford's a fine RB3, but if Judkins' situation ever clears out, we know he has top 20 upside. And then Joe Flacco can be a streamer. Like, hell, you want to stream him this week and stream him over CJ Stroud and Caleb Williams? Go right ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's a legit option this week, and it's crazy to say that for a 40-year-old, quarterback. But, I mean, like if you look at it from a value perspective, I get it. I was more into Tillman than Jeudy, from a value perspective this season, just because, I mean, Tillman last year, that final month, he had like a 22% target share in that offense, right? Like he was getting used, and he should more than likely still be used, just given what they have around him. And then that backfield, I think that, we'll probably see Jerome Ford like get, just because he's the veteran, and they might go with the veteran early on. But Dylan Sampson, I've said it on this show, like Ford is the safer one, maybe early on the season, like negative game script kind of back too. But Dylan Sampson to me has the upside of the two, and especially, if Judkins doesn't, we have no idea what's going to go on with Judkins, like we just zero clue. So there could be some value out of it. Did you say you had two, or is the Browns you're fine? You're gonna walk away from this podcast with the Cleveland Browns as your number one answer there?
My breakout offense. Well, because I didn't want to go obvious with the Bears or Jaguars. So I wanted to be a little over there. Hey, let me ask you a question. Do you think, like, if we got to week 17 and Cedric Tillman had more fantasy points than Jerry Jeudy, would you be falling out of your chair? Shocked?
No.
Jerry,
I've said it many times on this show. Jeudy was the same player last year that he's always been, in my opinion. Like he wasn't anything, like if you look at all of his per route run numbers, if you watch him, like I didn't see anything like special or different. The thing that was different is that he ran more routes than any other player in football last year, right? Like they were dropping back to pass so much, and he's just a volume getter, right? And he was obviously the de facto dude, once Cedric Tillman went, they trade Amari Cooper, and then Cedric Tillman, goes down. I would obviously, give the edge to Jeudy, but it wouldn't be like a shocking revelation if we just see Tillman, find the end zone 8 times and Jeudy only finds it 4 or something like that. And maybe the target shares or Judy's only like 1 or 2 percentage points higher. I think that's definitely in the range of outcomes here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I'll give you a bonus one, not to be the Browns. I hope for fantasy purposes, I have egg on my face. I'm not a Jackson Dart guy. I hope I'm wrong. And all of a sudden Jackson Dart makes Malik Neighbors, either Wandell or Slayton, Theo Johnson, which by the way, Theo Johnson, you talk about metrics and testing off the charts before there was Tyler Warren at Penn State. Yeah. Like Theo Johnson becomes a thing, that backfield is productive with 2 running backs. Like I don't see it, but I would kind of hope I was wrong just for the fun of it.
If Jackson Dart is legit, and he's looked legit so far, in my opinion.
I know.
Like if that's there, I mean, like there was also that one, tweet / quote I saw from someone reporting on the Giants. I don't know, because this is just off the top of my head, but apparently Brian Dable like went up to Jackson Dart and just told him that he loves him or something like that in the locker room, like just straight up, and just mentioning how much so like maybe that quarterback change happens sooner rather than later. All right, let's talk about some controversial players, because there's a lot of them this year. almost every round there seemed to be one. So I'm going to go player by player. We talked about one of them because we already talked about Tyler Warren, so we don't have to get to Tyler Warren. And, we'll see how many we get to here. But the first one to start with is Ashton Genty, your general thoughts. And when I say general thoughts, were you drafting them a lot? Did you find them as a value, as someone who you're avoiding, and just your general thoughts on that player?
Somebody that I almost had 0 shares of, because when I was at the mid back half of the first round, I was still taking Jacobs and Kyron Williams over him. And maybe I look stupid for that one, but I have questions. How many receptions is he going to get? I know that's the same argument you can make for Kyron, but that's where I gave Jacobs the edge, especially with Marshawn Lloyd hurt. And then the fact of what's the touchdowns going to be, or like what's the equity going to be there? And I would just lean to the Rams. So it was a very small margin where I still take Kyron, I still take Jacobs. And it just fell down to like I have Genty with Chase Brown, but by the time I picked, if it was the end of the first round, he was gone. Mm-hmm. If I was the middle of the first round, I was taking somebody else, maybe even a wide receiver. So I just never ended up with him just because I had a little bit more hesitation. Bijan Robinson was RB8 as a rookie in what was a quote unquote disappointing season, but everybody was taking him as the second or third running back. Like they can be really good and not be the best.
Yeah. I to me, I was kind of like a little bit below market just because I like the wide receivers going around Genty, and it's just easier to make those choices. But, Genty to me was generational in my prospect model, second best score behind CMC. And that dates back to 2011. So we'll see. You just mentioned Kyron Williams. So let's talk about Kyron Williams. It sounds like you're in on Williams this year.
I am. And I'm not saying like I don't understand because like I'm smarter than anybody else. Like there are reasons to have doubts, but I think the biggest reason got thrown out the window. The biggest fear we had, and I said this before on my podcast, is like, I think Sean McVay makes good running backs great. Do I think Kyron Williams is Kyron Williams on 20 other teams? No. And I think our biggest fear was that when Sean McVay gets tired of a running back, he flips the script, goes to the other one, and it's like, you're done. Like, I'm moving on. He's done it with Darrell Henderson and many others who were productive before it. So I think the fear was, oh my gosh, if it happens, Blake Corum, Jarquez Hunter, whoever he turns to, it's going to be done for Kyron. He got the contract. It's like, if Kyron has 2 bad games, it's not going to be like, well, we got to bench him. Let's go see what we have in Corum. And I think we took the biggest question mark and threw it out the window, where he's been RB6 each of the past 2 years. And I know 2 years ago was a little bit better on a per game basis than last year.
Right.
So if you're talking about per game basis, I think he's like RB9 or 10 last season. But if he even falls in between, like RB8, I still think he's a top 10 running back. I'm still taking him in front of some of the other names that people wanted to put in front of him. And it just came down to, I trust the Rams, I trust McVay, and I trust now that he has the contract, because Kyron Williams, I'm sure you remember this, towards the end of the season, his prop was 19 and a half of carries, and he was cruising the over. It's just, he's going to get the volume.
Yeah. I mean, look, if he gets the volume, he'll be totally fine. My stance has been that I do think, like, if you think his workload will be there, then you should be drafting him. If you like, I think there's some fragility to it, just from the standpoint of the Rams, they haven't thrown to their running backs for 6 years now. They've been bottom 3 in running back target share, and it's been obnoxious from that. The crazy thing is that Kyron Williams came into the league as a pass catching back. Like that's, I thought he was going to play more of like a scat back role in the NFL.
So did I.
And that's not what he's done at all, just given the way they've deployed him. And so the fragility aspect to me is what scares me a little bit, is the, like, he had last year, I don't think he's going to reach the 85% like running back rush share that he had last year. But, if he's in that, like, if he gets to a 70% share, let's say, then we're starting to think like, oh, maybe the ceiling won't hit. But if you feel confident, that it'll be there for him, then yeah, you should be drafting him. Let's talk about Tyreek Hill, who's not a captain anymore. I don't know if you heard about this or not. So Tyreek Hill, no longer a captain. Someone actually asked a mailbag question this week of like how much I care about that. So I guess I'll throw it to you. Tyreek Hill, no longer a captain of the Dolphins. People have been like either way in saying that he is one of the best values in drafts this year, or just way out saying they don't want to touch it. This is the next Antonio Brown. Where do you stand?
I could not care less about the captain situation. Just couldn't. And when it comes down to the Antonio Brown, like, again, I don't think we can put Antonio Brown basically on anybody else in existence. That's the whole bag of his own. Yeah. It comes down to, like, we are talking about somebody approaching 32 relying on speed. So I get the hesitancy, but I also get that just 2 years ago, heading at 29 into his 30-year-old season, that he still was top of the league. So I think it comes down to, I'm okay with him, which so it kind of might sound like a middle ground situation, as a mid-high end wide receiver too, because I do think there still is the potential for top 5. Yeah. Would I bet on it? Absolutely not. That's why he's not even a wide receiver 1 for me. Right. Do I think he's a wide receiver 3? No, I think a hell of a lot went wrong for the Dolphins last year, but I will say the reason he is risky, I think, in my opinion, as a wide receiver 2 still is because it's not just Hill. There's so many factors there. It's Tua getting hurt, and we've seen what happens to this offense when he gets hurt. But I also think it's on McDaniel. We saw the NFL adjust to McDaniel last year. They said, you know what? We're going to stop playing you tight and letting you do all this stuff after the catch. We're going to kind of play almost like, I called it like a double shell. I don't know if the NFL is coming around, but they kind of double shelled the offense and basically said, we're going to keep everything in front. Good luck. And the NFL figured McDaniel out. He now needs to adjust back and get Hill thrown open, and so he can do stuff after the catch or even deep. So I think there is risk, but that's why I say it's the middle ground, because I still think there's somebody for 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns, and I still think there's a world where he repeats last year and we're disappointed. Yeah, look, I've been middle ground with Tyreek for the most part too. You know, you can see the scenario where he has that top 5 season, but then like you said, the offensive line too, right? Huge problem, that offensive line, where you want Tua to have time to be able to get it down the field. And if that's not there, then that's a problem, you know? So, you know, I could see it going many, many directions. Sorry that we weren't very helpful with that one, listener. Let's go to Amari and Hampton, where Rich Eisen broke the news that he is evidently starting this week. He was told that Amari and Hampton is starting, but Najee Harris now back, seemingly going to be able to be active and play after that fireworks incident. Where are you with Amari and Hampton? So pre-draft, I was Hampton very close to Genty. I would take Genty 10 out of 10 times. I just thought the gap was smaller than some people wanted to make it. Just similar to Gibbs and Bijan back in the day. Back in the day, it was 2 years ago. So I just say that to say, like, I like Hampton a lot. It's Greg Roman and his offense. This is the same offense that kept turning to freaking Gus Edwards again. I just think Harris isn't going to be so much a value in his own right. I just think he's going to be a thorn in Hampton's side. Yeah, and it's not a huge one, but we also have to see if the offense, surprisingly, last year threw a lot inside the 10-yard line. They weren't even at the top of the league. They were actually near the top of the league for throwing versus running. And I think that will change with Hampton and Harris. But what if it's a lot of Harris and not so much Hampton? Where all I say is to present the fact that I just don't think Hampton's going to bell cow this backfield. So 240, 250 touches. Yeah, I still think he's a top 15 running back because that talent and that offense. Absolutely. Right. If he finishes at RB1, wouldn't be shocked. The problem I had with Hampton is because Harris, stop playing with fireworks, everybody. The reason like Harris not being out there is Hampton kept getting pushed up. And then I'm like, well, if you're going to be drafting him as a fringe RB1, I'm out. Yeah, the weird thing with Hampton is that he's almost like a safe option as a rookie. Like the funny thing with like the Greg Roman offense, and I've tweeted about this and written about it and talked about it, but like he's been a coordinator for 10 years now and completed seasons. He got fired in Buffalo after like a month, but he's had 10 completed seasons in the NFL. His average running back rank and running back target share rank has been 26.3. So on average, his backfields end up ranking like 26th or 27th in team running back target share, which is obviously very, very low. And then if you even adjust that for like, because people will come back and be like, well, he had mobile quarterbacks or, he had, bad running backs back there. But when you adjust for that, every single running back and the quarterback still stuck around in those offenses. Like we've seen, for instance, Lamar Jackson playing without Greg Roman the last couple of years, and they've had much higher running back target shares without Roman than with Roman, right? And they've had Derrick Henry, who's not a target getter. Like that's not what he does. Yeah. He's not a receiving back, right? And so there's a lot of reason to believe that this offense just doesn't target running backs at a super, super high clip. And to me, that screamed that Amari Hampton was probably more of a floor play, like a high end RB2 type play with maybe not that like top 6 kind of running back upside. And then when the Najee stuff happened, I'm like, okay, well, maybe there is that top 6 running back upside. And now I'm starting to come back a little bit more just because I do think, like you said, he could just be a thorn. Like he could just be really, really obnoxious, really annoying. And we might not see like full Hampton until towards the end of the year, hopefully, if we see it this year, right. And, I don't mind that they were, because like last year when Justin Herbert was healthy, right? Because he started the season with that like ankle injury and stuff, they did become a little bit more pass heavy.
And I don't think that would be like a terrible thing necessarily, because I think the offense would be more efficient and hopefully have more scoring opportunities and stuff. But like you said, hopefully at the goal line and near the end zone, they are a little bit more run heavy, because that would then, help Hampton get those touchdowns. Xavier Worthy is a really fun one, where Rashee Rice now officially first 6 games of the season, not going to be playing. Have you been in or out on Worthy?
That's one you could actually put on my list of getting a lot of Xavier Worthy, just because knew the Rashee Rice suspension was coming. Obviously didn't know it was going to be to start the year. But the thing I kept bringing up was that for everything that people talked about for Rashee Rice's rookie season, Xavier Worthy did the same thing at the end of the year last year. And then we saw like that this offense kind of needed him. And it wasn't so much the fact like I don't like Rice and Worthy. Like if I knew both of them were on the field 17 games, I would take Rice over Worthy, but the gap wouldn't be that big. I actually went into this when there was that early, you remember like a month or two ago, there was like, oh, it might not even happen until 2026 for the suspension. I was like, okay, well, Travis Kelce's toast. Like he's the one that's going to fall to the wayside.
Right.
And I actually thought this could be like Rice 23, 24% target share and Worthy like hovering around 20, and kind of what they used to do with Kelce and Hill. But now Kelce is the one that falls to the wayside, is like a 13%.
Yeah.
Kind of like the 49ers to a degree. So I've been in on Worthy a lot, because there's also like, when I said before about presenting, like, play out the scenarios in your mind, like, there's a world where would you be shocked if Xavier Worthy was just better than Rice because he hasn't been injured? He's been with the team. He makes another step forward. I would, again, still take Rice.
Right.
It's just, it's similar to the Devontae Adams argument that people want to make with the Rams for Nakua. Like, if we got to the end of the year and they're neck and neck, or even Adams. And that's why, because Worthy was still going so cheap, and still is somehow today, even knowing we have the 6-game suspension, that he's going as a fringe wide receiver 2 or 3, and you get him for the first 6 weeks with no Rice. Like, I want more people to be on Worthy.
That was the weird thing that I witnessed, especially in like the best ball streets, where like, the market reacts immediately to different news items and stuff like that. And when we officially learned, because again, like you noted, like we didn't, like a lot of people were saying that Rice, because he wasn't going to get have his court date until January of 2026, and so we were making the assumption that, oh, well then, the NFL doesn't react and act until after these things happen, so this could be another year where Rashee Rice is on the field. And so, once that officially happened, that he pled guilty and he took, whatever, all the legal stuff that happened, when that went down, I was shocked that Xavier Worthy's ADP barely moved when we officially knew that there was on DraftKings all summer, you had Jordan Addison knowing that he was going to be suspended. We all knew he was going to be suspended. And then his ADP didn't fall until after the official suspension happened, right? But then with Rashee Rice, we find out that he's going to miss 6, or he's going to be suspended this year, right? We don't know exactly when. And Xavier Worthy's ADP doesn't shift. So I was of the belief where I was like, yes, I like Rice more than Worthy. And then I ended up I'm overweight on Worthy now after the ADP didn't move. Like it's just a wild, like it's just a really good example to me of like, this is why when we talk about liking and not liking players, it's all versus cost, right? Like we don't, we don't hate these guys, or it's just all versus what we're paying to get them. And so, like I liked Worthy as a prospect. I have some concern about like ceiling. Like, do you think that he has like a true top 10 ceiling in him, Xavier Worthy?
No, I think his ceiling's kind of more in the 15 to 20, like most DJ Moore seasons.
Yeah, or like a Deshaun Jackson when he was at his peak or something like that. Yeah. That's kind of where I'm at too. All right, we got to talk about Bill Krosky-Merritt, right? We got to talk about Corey Krosky-Merritt, because what fantasy podcast these days doesn't reference something about the Washington backfield? So, all right, just give it to me. Where are you at with Jacory Krosky-Merritt?
So I don't want to throw out the person's name, because in case they're wrong, I don't want people to come for him. But I have a very, very, very trusted person close to the Commander situation that said, I warn you coming out of the gate for Jacory Krosky, or Bill, we'll just call him 4-name guy for the Commanders, because he said this. He's like, the team does love Krosky-Merritt. Let me make that clear. The issue is, as you well know, he's played 1 game since 2023.
Right.
So the thought is, because he's on the Commanders and they do love him and they want him for the second half, that they are going full blown committee out of the gate, and it's going to be a nightmare for us, when the answer just truly is, Austin Eckler, who was productive last year, the pass catching option, not to mention the matchup with the Giants. If you want to try to avoid that defensive line, what are you doing?
Right.
Check out Austin Eckler. So he's like, it's going to be slow. He's like, don't be shocked if he has 5 to 7 touches in week 1. And we're just like infuriated. But that's why kind of dovetail into this when we're talking about strategy and stuff like that. And I know it kind of works with a lot of things you and I are talking about. I know you didn't ask me this, but the preseason, I think the perception of you're talking about Krosky Merritt, I'm talking about him, like all these players, and they get hyped. And so 2 months ago, Trevion Henderson talked about, and we see these guys every single preseason, the helium, they just rise. And then you almost like you get people in your drafts are like, well, I got to get them because I need to look like the smartest person. And then you not only buy all the risk, you take them where there's no possible way they can even return value. And I think that Krosky Merritt was fine until this past week. I would not draft them at like RB 28, 30, kind of like as my bench option where I can be patient. And maybe that's the tell for everybody out there. If this person that told me this is correct, the immediate thing you should be doing after 2-3 weeks, go get him on the cheap because he'll be nice in the second half of the season.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Like, I think I had him ranked, like, it was past RB 35 for me. I couldn't draft him in like the top 35. But like, once you get past some of those players in that range, you're just like,
upside.
Everyone's kind of just like, like just a lot of question marks and stuff. So I kind of just threw him in there. But then I realized other people are liking, I didn't get him in any draft after, the steam really hit, right? I just couldn't. Yep. I Darwin Thompson flashbacks were hitting me and I got freaked out. But no, I mean, like, he had some really interesting like peripheral numbers in college. The Zap model that I use didn't really love him that much just because his volume numbers, like related numbers and the stuff that I look, and his receiving numbers were not good. Like he just didn't have much of a receiving backbone. And so that's another thing is that I worry about what that ceiling will look like down the stretch, even if Austin Eckler is still healthy, because we know that he was still a good pass catcher last year, Eckler, and like you said, it's a decent spot for him to just get some of those dump offs. Like, are you this week ranking Chris Rodriguez ahead of Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt?
No, just because I'll chase the ceiling, and I think Chris Rodriguez is just based on hopefully getting a touchdown, which if he hits, cool or whatever. But they're both basically in don't start him range. And I think with like this backfield, as we've learned throughout the years, and hopefully most people know this, but like going back to Cam Newton and like all these, when you have that kind of quarterback that runs as much as they do, you only want one option, hopefully next to him. You don't want 2-3 options because then it's just, the volume just can't be there.
Yeah, and I wonder even at the goal line, like, are they going to run some funny stuff and funky stuff with Debo at times? And like,
I was just going to say, Debo's going to get 3 touches a game.
There's a lot that can go, and I don't mind them for sure. Especially, I got lucky that I had good CLV with him in best ball and was drafting him in like the 19th and 20th round early on. But I could not, I can't get behind the 6th, 7th round price tag. It's just really, really difficult for me. All right, one more player since we talked about Tyler Warren. This one maybe doesn't seem controversial, but I kind of think it like it's people have had differing views, but Jordan Mason, going from San Francisco to Minnesota, splitting that backfield with Aaron Jones. A lot of people think that he's just going to take over, but where are you at with him?
I don't think he's going to take over. I think this is kind of the Steelers inverse, where if Warren was the lead and Najee Harris was the timeshare piece. And it's not that like Jordan Mason was lighting the world on fire in short yardage. I know he got stuffed a lot. And this is where like, I think to go back to the beginning of our conversations, like where metrics, like everybody's like, well, Jordan Mason was 1 for whatever, but like also, okay, well, look at the plays where he was 1 for whatever. And like, at the 1 yard line is going to be really tough for a lot of running backs unless you're Derrick Henry. So you have to take all that into the equation, but to take one step back, it's not that Aaron Jones has ever been terrible either. Like he's not a thumper, but this is a guy who ran for double-digit scores twice with the Packers. Again, some of them not being from the 2-yard line, but the Minnesota Vikings offensive line was doing that team zero favors last year. I know it's turned around and people are rating it as a potential top 10 unit. Well, cool. That also helps Aaron Jones. Do I think Aaron Jones is the premier back he was with the Packers and we wanted more touches for him? No, but that's not kind of really who Aaron Jones ever was. The Packers told us that. He needs to be a timeshare. Yeah. But I would still take Jones over Mason. Now, of course, if Jones gets hurt, everybody's going to be nuts for Jordan Mason, and that's cool because he'll kind of get that bell cow work. But as it stands right now, I think Mason is in that RB3, 4-ish range, depending on what your team and roster size looks like. Whereas, yeah, he's going to get touches every single week, but without a touchdown, you might be looking at 8 for 40, 9 for 40, 10, maybe he gets 12 carries and he gets you 60 yards, but without a touchdown, it's going to be hard to be excited about him.
Yeah, and there's just he hasn't been a receiver throughout his career, and even at, when he was at Georgia Tech, he played with Jahmyr Gibbs, and you can make arguments, whatever, but like last year in San Francisco, he had the opportunity to be a pass catching back because he was the lead back for them, and he had like a 3% target share, right? Like he was not seeing any work as a receiver, and you can sit there and say like, oh, Kyle Shanahan's offense doesn't favor pass catching backs outside of Christian McCaffrey, because I've seen that sort of retort to that. But Isaac Rendo was seeing more work as a receiver when he was, in that role. And so I do question, like I think the pairing from a real football perspective makes a ton of sense, right? You get an early down guy like Jordan Mason with an aged, receiving back. Because like to me, Aaron Jones has always been one of the most underrated receiving running backs in all of football, right? And so you combine those two things and you're like, this makes so much sense to have those two guys together. I just am going to always favor the pass catching back in these scenarios, so I've been going after Aaron Jones more. I'm not like overweight on Aaron Jones because of the age and all that kind of stuff, but I agree that I haven't been able to like really back the Jordan Mason stuff, because realistically it's like Jordan Mason is basically Braylon Allen in a better offense, right? And so, from like a projection standpoint.
I was going to say ETN and Bigsby.
Exactly, ETN and Bigsby. Like he's the tank Bigsby. I would rather just take the Bigsby discount if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to get that early down guy. And I think, again, I always preface like, I know I brought up best ball and stuff, but it's a little bit different in best ball because you're not having to predict when these touchdowns are happening and stuff. But I do think that it's going to be a touchdown dependent type player, like you're saying. So definitely the same page with Jordan Mason. All right. Last question before I let you go. You kind of teased it earlier. Give me a bold prediction for this 2025 season.
Yeah, remember it's bold, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to come strong with this one. Jaden Higgins is the number 2 rookie wide receiver for fantasy.
Ooh.
Here's why. So I compared him to Marvin Jones pre-draft. My colleague Dane Brugler said, I see your Marvin Jones. I'm coming with Nico Collins. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I love you, Dane. I was like, but that one's really aggressive. But here's why I like it, is because even if he is Marvin Jones, to see that step up with, by the way, good timing on recording this podcast, because I had this as my hot take even before the Christian Kirk missing practice with a hamstring injury, because he's Christian Kirk, is the fact that if you look at where CJ Stroud still had some success last year when he was under pressure, was throwing to Nico Collins, because when under pressure with Nico Collins, that was actually one of the highest yards per route run of any wide receiver when under pressure, was Stroud to Collins. And I think that Higgins can replicate a lot of what Collins does. So if you gave me 90% Collins on the other side of them, stock up. If we're buying into the bounce back for CJ Stroud, that the offensive line's been somewhat improved, and that we believe CJ Stroud is more the rookie season one, Higgins playing on the outside, Kirk in the slot, or Noel when he takes over, or whichever, because he's hurt. But I just looked at Higgins as like, again, Marvin Jones is what I feel like is a floor. Okay, 1,000, 1,100 yards, 6, 7, 8 touchdowns. Yeah, I think Travis Hunter can do that. Yeah, I think that Matthew Golden's in that world too. But if I'm wrong, and I'm saying this and Dane's right, and he is Nico Collins, I mean, we might be looking at somebody who can put up 11, 12, 1,300 yards. Would I bet on it? Obviously not. You asked for a hot take. Yeah. But I'm a Jaden Higgins fan, and I think that there's a possibility he's the number 2 wide receiver for rookies in fantasy.
Now, not to get you even more excited, but one of his 3 statistical comps in the ZAP model was Nico Collins. So
I was letting you mention that. I read that. Trust me. I remember that part as well. So I was letting you throw that nugget in.
It's so funny watching, and this is a total aside, but it's so funny watching these teams draft wide receivers that have that are complete archetypes of wide receivers they already have. Like when I looked at, like, there was one year, like last year, like Xavier Worthy was a Hollywood Brown comp. Like that was one of his comps, or like Adonai Mitchell, one of his comps was Alec Pierce in my prospect model. It's like, there's just always like these guys that, or this year, Jalen Royals was Rashee Rice. That was one of his top comps. Like there's always this connection. Like they always have their dudes. I mean, I think Higgins is, it's a great call. Like I think that he's someone who, I don't know would be able to be a standalone one, but Nico Collins wasn't able to either right away, right? So him being able to play alongside Nico might be a really big benefit in the end. So I like that call a lot, especially with this Christian Kirk hamstring, which seemed like, I guess, it was going to be inevitable because it's Christian Kirk. But
I mean, like Christian Kirk when healthy, yay. But how often do we get that?
Yeah. Right, exactly. Jake, man, this was awesome. Let everyone know where they can find you, what you're working on, and what you're doing in this 2025 season.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was a fun talk. At Only Kid over the Athletic, where everything is. And then I resurrected the old podcast. It's now the All In Speed Run, which will have JJ on at some point this season for a little short stint. Yeah, on a Wednesday there. So I appreciate that. And like I said, I appreciate you having me. This was a lot of fun. Yeah,
man, it was great chopping it up with you. As usual, you guys can find all my work over on lateround.com. I mean, if you still want to buy a draft guide, I won't stop you, but more than likely your drafts are over, but you can still check that out over on lateround.com. Sign up for the newsletter. It's totally free. Make sure you're subscribed to both the podcast and the YouTube channel. Otherwise, everyone, thanks for tuning in.